Why do organizations keep talking about retention while doing the exact things that drive people to leave? That's the conversation today. See, turnover is expensive. Training is often weak, and too many leaders are still treating retention like a staffing issue instead of what it really is, a leadership, culture, and performance issue. In this episode, we dig into the factors that inspire people to stay, what quietly pushes them out, and what leaders can do to build stronger teams, better performance, and a more stable workforce. My guest today is Michael Gomez. Michael's a senior HR executive with more than 30 years of experience, helping organizations improve retention, engagement, and workforce performance. He's held executive leadership roles with brands like AT&T, PepsiCo, Disney, McDonald's, and Tasty Restaurant Group, giving him a front row seat to what it takes to support people and performance at scale. He brings a practical, real-world perspective on what actually helps employees grow, stay, and do great work. So welcome to the Working Well podcast. We're the show that explores the critical intersection of leadership, business strategy, and sustainable human performance, and how those areas are defining the future of work. I'm your host, Tim Borys. Michael, great to have you on the show, and I'm so excited to dive into all things retention and helping people and businesses thrive through HR.
Awesome.
Great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Tim. Pleasure to be here.
And so we talked a lot before this, and I love your background. I love your approach to call it the people side of business. And I think it's pretty refreshing in the industry. So across all the experience you have, what do you feel that leaders still get wrong about retention?
And it's a costly topic, right? If you get it right, you're winning big. And if you don't, you're really paying the price, right? But the benefits to the employees with greater stability and a lack of having to retrain other people coming in who are new. I mean, it is tremendous to really focus on the core requirements for success, and there's so many, right? I mean, from compensation and benefits, right? That's a huge one right there. You have to have that right. Probably have to pay at least in the 50 percentile to be competitive. Some of the better employers are doing much higher, 75%, even higher. But you have to get that right. The benefits piece is so important to people, especially now post-COVID. Mental illness is up 5 times. It's a huge issue for people. So not only what is the company offering, but how affordable is what they're offering to the people, especially if you're a lower income hourly worker and say in a restaurant, for example. So, that's, I think, a big piece of it. But, career development and appreciation and a culture of belonging, all these things really culminate and they multiply with each other. Right. So it's like 2 times 2 times 0 equals 0. Right. You have to get them all right. If you're not paying what you need to pay, it's really a lost cause. Right. So there are standards that need to be met in order to achieve certain goals. But, retention is just a huge and important topic to every employer across America.
Yeah. And, for those listening, a lot of my guests are from the US. I'm in Canada. So there's quite a few differences in, especially the benefits side. But in a lot of entry-level industries, you're not, and I say entry-level, frontline service type industries, you don't get those benefits, uh, or it hasn't been traditionally offered. I worked
Well,
in restaurant and hospitality for many years, and we never had benefits.
yeah. Well, you have to work a certain amount of hours in order to get them, certainly. Many employers do offer them, benefit plans, but in order to enroll you, it comes out of your check. And for many employees, there's not enough money left in their check after taxes and after they have to pay their bills to pay for benefits. And so, and this was certainly the case in most QSR organizations across the country. There's just an affordability issue that is um, one that people haven't really figured out a way to solve, at least until not recently. Um, One of the things we were able to discover in my last stint supporting a large QSR organization, 6 brands, 23 states, 440 units, was that a large portion of the employees couldn't afford the benefits like other employers. Okay, but what do you do about it? And is there a plan, that leverages our tax code appropriately, that offers benefits to employee at a low or de minimis cost, that changes their lives? And so when you looked hard at it, we found a plan through a company called HealthWorks HR Insurance Solutions in California, a health work plan, a minimal essential coverage plan. And we took a close look at it. Our ERISA attorney looked at it very closely. It's in 100 companies across the U.S., 60 QSR brands, all of which have ERISA attorneys audited by the Department of Justice every year. And it offers all these tremendous great benefits at no net cost because it partners with a 501c3 nonprofit for lower income workers. It's designed for lower income workers. And what do you know? Well, that's what we had. And so we leveraged this plan, provided 7,000 employees all of these benefits at no net cost, and changed their lives.
Yeah.
And changed their lives. But in order to do it, you have to understand what the problems are. You have to do a gap analysis. You have to look. And when we looked at the benefits, we saw, great plans, you know, uh, premium plans, Blue Cross Blue Shield, American Worker, very good plans. But the reality was the affordability just wasn't there for our lower income workers. And so we provided HealthWorks at no net cost to 7,000 people in September 1 of last year. And it's really been just a game changer. But moreover, they get a little bit more money in their check. So everybody got a raise. So they get all of these benefits, a $25,000 term life insurance policy, discounts on prescription drug benefits, indemnities, meaning cash in the form of a check. If you get admitted to a hospital, $1,000, boom. You're going to be there a month. Every day thereafter for that month, you get money. Okay. You get in an accident, you get a check. So these are real benefits that you can use, that people need. You have to get airlifted in Montana. You broke your leg to a hospital. HealthWorks will pay for it. All right. So this is what we did for those people. So one of the most powerful ways of reducing turnover, and the stories have been fantastic, right? People are using and benefiting from it. But more importantly, there's a FICA tax savings associated. So the benefit to the business has been tremendous from a SUMA and FICA tax savings standpoint. So anyway, that's just one of the tactical approaches to it, but many components that impact retention. You have to recognize people appropriately. You have to do promotions appropriately. It has to be merit-based. People have to think it's fair. There have to be equity adjustments, right? All of these things impact retention.
Before we get into too many of the solutions, how do you actually define healthy retention? Because not all turnover is bad, and not all stability, I guess, is a good sign.
Yeah, well, it's a fair question. You have to look at norms. You have to look at high performance brands. You have to benchmark. And it's industry driven. Like for the QSR industry, 100% turnover is pretty much an expectation. You have some examples, 70, 75% turnover, outlying areas, unique continuity. But 100 is a pretty good standard. But sadly, many brands are at 300, 400%, 250, right? And it's just spinning out of control. But the objective would be to get to that 100% turnover number, because that is, to answer your question, a norm that you can reasonably expect that you would probably, reasonably have in the QSR industry.
And for those
Okay.
listening that might not know what QSR, quick service restaurants. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, quick service restaurants, yeah. So, but interestingly enough, Center of Hospitality Management, Cornell University did a really cool study on turnover, and they used a Pizza Hut restaurant, a standard size restaurant, and they determined a couple of really interesting things, and one was that the turnover percent is very close to the turnover cost. So if the turnover percent is say 150% turnover, the turnover cost is over 140K. And now this is factoring in things, recruiting, selection, onboarding, and productivity losses into the equation, right? Across the number of employees and that type of attrition. That's a lot of money. So if you're in an environment where you're doing 250 as a turnover percent and that restaurant goes to 150, that's 100K savings in that one restaurant alone. So this is part of why we adopted the HealthWork model, because it has that type of impact. And when we benchmarked other franchisees, they saw that 100-point decline. And already, TRG is seeing, 20% decline in the turnover, right? So it's $1 million across business units in the first year, boom,
Yeah.
plus the FICA tax savings. So really tremendous. But back to the point of costs and the importance of retention, because it's so vital to the company's profitability.
As you're talking about that type of turnover, most corporate office type businesses would just be like minds blown if there was that type of turnover. And I think at least from my perspective, and I'm fully aware that I'm probably wrong, but a lot of people expect that you know QSR type roles. It's like, wow, that's just the nature of the business, and so they maybe don't focus on it as much. You mentioned a bunch of other things that can help improve the retention and employee experience. So, like, what do the restaurants that get it right actually do?
Hmm. Wow. Well, it's a great question. I would say they're incredibly process driven, incredibly process, and incredibly focused on the experience of the customer and what it takes to get there, right? To exceed those expectations in a way individuals haven't seen before that makes them return for so many repeat visits, right? This is what, say, a Chick-fil-A and the QSR, excuse me, quick service restaurant industry is doing so well. In-N-Out is doing so well, 8 million a unit, right? This is the objective, right? I was benchmarking In-N-Out, a few weeks ago, and I just couldn't believe it. I walk in, the lighting's perfect, right? All the displays are positioned correctly, the facings are right, all the uniforms of all the employees perfect, white, smocks, different, logos, different pins, different, all perfect, right? All well trained on their positions, so I start speaking to, someone in the lobby, one of the employees, and I say, how do you like working here? She's like, I love working here. She's like, well, how does it work? She's like, well, you know, she's our store manager makes 120,000 a year. We come in and, $21 a year to start. And we go through different skill-based pay stations. You start in the lobby, you have video-based training where you learn, and then there's the application of it in the restaurant with someone supervising you. And this is how it's set up through all the different pay stations. And you can progress from fries to burgers to et cetera. Our fries come in fresh, the production, the supply chain, the meat is fresh every day. The experience is right every day. And I'm just like, wow. So that's excellence, right? Looking at every work stream, every core process, and just nailing it, right? Understanding that you're looking at it from the customer's perspective, trying to exceed those expectations.
Yeah, and you mentioned a few things about from the employee perspective too, and I see those going hand in hand. What other things from the employee perspective? You didn't.
Well, they are the ones that are asked to train the new people coming in. So they like the fact that there's continuity and they form relationships with people, right? So, oh, John has left. Oh, right. And so, no, it's like, hey, John, see John again. Oh, Mary, hi, Mary. Sally. So it makes people feel more secure and comfortable. Continuity is a good thing. Trust levels are higher. That's all very, very good. But in terms of how you impact the employees, I think it's how you manage them. Okay. It's really important how they're managed. Okay. No, empowerment is a cool thing. And managers like to be empowering, with people, but empowerment doesn't equal abandonment. Okay. And so
Abnegation versus delegation, that type of
so,
approach.
you have to look at that core work. You have to make sure the motivation and skill level exists to execute that core work. And it is that understanding that will determine what level of coaching, facilitation, delegation, or direction you're providing to the individual. Okay. But if you're saying, yeah, okay, go do it, and they motivate it, but they don't know how, they're going to fail.
Yeah.
They're going to fail, and no one wants to fail. Right. So, but it's incumbent upon the leaders to look at their work and to make sure that they have not only the motivation to do it, but the skill to do it every step along the way. That is the responsibility of a good manager and a good leader.
Hmm. And so, as far as those responsibilities, what different management or leadership styles have you seen that really shape whether people stay, disengage, or start looking elsewhere?
Well, in a service business, you really want to look at the traditional organizational pyramid and flip it upside down, where those closest to the customer are now most valuable, with the rest as servant leaders to that end, right? Supporting the transactions, for TRG was 30 million transactions, right? 500 million in revenue. And that's the difference between people coming back. It's those experiences. As soon as that door opens, they have an opportunity to control that experience that within those four walls, very powerful. Um, and so how do you get there? They have to feel like they want to. Right. Employee satisfaction comes before the customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
If you have employees who are upset, disgruntled, how do you think they're going to do with the customers, right? Not as well as if they're very happy.
Yeah.
Okay. So, anyway, just a couple of more points. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I see a lot of businesses focusing on the customer experience and the systems and the processes, and they dial those in, but they often neglect the people side. Your people have to be on board with those processes and the systems and be trained and inspired to show up and provide and live into that system.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think look, there's a couple of points here. One, the managers, the leaders need to lead. And part of leading being about being there now for the people, being accessible, having employee huddle sessions, and letting them know that A, you're listening and that you care.
Yeah.
Okay. Very, very important. If they feel if you're not authentic, if you're not listening, if you don't care, if you're insensitive, the employees will leave faster. They don't leave companies, they leave leaders.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that is I think, a very, very important part, but also providing them the skills that they need. And in decentralized multi unit environments, how do you get to the people? How do you provide just in time what they need? Right. Well, I think learning management systems are the most efficient delivery mechanism, right? 5 to 15-minute learning modules provided. high quality content. We're in search of wow. Okay. We're after not just technical skills. How do you, with the degrees or cooking the chicken, the process, whatever, but, customer management, de-escalation, crisis management, critical thinking, right? Um, situational leadership, right? Financial acumen, P&L management, right? And so when they're learning some of these soft skills, they're like, wow, I'm being developed here. And that's the magic where technical skills and soft skills come together, right? And they feel developed. And, but you have to provide the mechanism, and it is the most efficient delivery mechanism from a training perspective, right? And it has to be short. No one wants an hour, right? Especially if you're in there, no one can spend that kind of time. So it's got to be short, it's got to be upbeat, it's got to be helpful, right? And so you have to spend a lot of time making sure you're delivering the right messaging at the right time, right? Because they have a bandwidth too, right? Right. And so that's part of it. So there's so many things that are important that impact retention, and you have to do so many of them, in order to be effective. And there's an expectation increasingly with this workforce that, you do more, not less, and I think HealthWorks is a perfect example of something that really helps the people and satisfies them in a way that they haven't been able to receive before.
You mentioned the call it micro learning, those little 5 to 10 minutes, little learning modules. Where does that fit into the workflow of the average day for a QSR worker?
Interesting. Well, that's the cool thing about it because you provide a window. They don't have to, when they receive it, they don't have to do it that right then. It's not, it's like, they don't have to start it right then. There's flexibility. They might be busy. So they have like a 2-week window where they can complete it. And you can institute a modicum of testing to ensure comprehension,
Hmm.
right? Which is key, right? You can do that, right? But it's got to be short. It's got to be right, right? It's got to be well timed, right? And it's a strategy. It is an absolute strategy. And that's part of it. Learning management system training just in time.
I see this in a lot of my executive coaching clients. They're leaders in the corporate world, all kinds of different industries, not necessarily QSR, but the what we often see is that there's this training, but then the reinforcement and implementation starts to fall flat. And we know, like Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, so much gets forgotten right away unless it's specifically implemented. And there's recall check-ins uh, on a regular basis. So, how have you seen that work? They could do their onboarding and it's watch these interpersonal or de-escalation type things. How do they get integrated into the regular workflow?
You build it in and you relegate everyone to it within a system that's transparent that records every step along the way, much like in and out. It's the video training, but then there's the application. That's part of the process. That's right. There's the validation or no more retraining, right? So, but once it's part of the process and it's built in to the training plan and it's transparent, you can see it. Anyone can come in and go, oh, Elizabeth finished her training today with John. Cool. Right. And that's how you relegate processes to the point of achieving excellence, right? And we did that recently with a new performance management and appraisal system called PerformYard. Fantastic. We had 70% of the employees receiving performance appraisals, and we implemented the system, and it went up to 80% complete. Okay, but it's transparent. Right. And it's a team thing where the employee provides their input and they're happy to do it. They worked all year. Right. And then it's all there ready for the supervisor to come in and look at. But one of the cool things about it is there's a share screen where they can move over the data that they like from the employee into their review that they're doing for the employee. So they're like, yeah, I think I like this over here. They move it in, and all of a sudden, boom, boom, in an hour, you've done a review instead of 8 hours or not at all,
Yeah.
right? And you can go into the system and you can see across the organization, across brands, who's completing, who's received, who hasn't, who has, right? And when everyone knows that's how it is, okay, it has a way of getting people to participate. And then it's a healthy thing, all right, because now you're bringing a supervisor and an employee together, right? It's a very, very healthy thing, and people rely on it, you know. The last training session I had, I touched on this and a number of other points, and normally there's only like, 100 people on a call, so there's 388. They want, they have a big interest in how they're reviewed and the performance management, et cetera.
Well, I love that. And what I'm hearing is that the larger corporate world can learn a lot from the systems in place in the QSR industry, because I see so many times in the traditional corporate world where someone goes to a conference or attends a workshop, and they attend, company invests a bunch of money in that, and then there's zero follow through. They like the binders, the manuals, the information gets put in a filing cabinet or on a bookshelf or just into the ether, and it never gets looked at again. Some folder on a computer, and there's no follow up with from their leader. There's no follow up and how it's tied to their capacity and capability in the role. So I love to hear that
Wow.
people are walking through that process and it's pretty transparent.
Yeah. Well, part of leading effectively is understanding pattern creation that sets the tone for the culture and how employees will be supported throughout their employment cycle throughout the year, right? And if they understand that performance planning comes in the beginning and that a mid-year calibration comes halfway through, and then a management pulse survey happens and a performance review happens every year. This is the culture being formulated for people to feel comfortable with. This is how we operate, right? So these are ways of effectively leading, but you have to understand pattern creation. You also have to understand pattern recognition. You could easily in the QSR industry say, "Oh my God, it's time to sell." But if you look at the patterns of the macroeconomic trends, the international trends, what's happening with Cuba, with Venezuela, when you understand what's going on with crypto, the impact, you're like, wow, this is going to go, and maybe this is not the time to sell. So pattern recognition is a key leadership quality, just like pattern creation. Yeah.
Absolutely. And now we talked quite a bit about management behaviors and things that help, call it, employees thrive and improve retention. But what ones don't get talked about as much that you've seen make some of the biggest difference in that retention?
You have to be there for people. People want to know how much you care before they care how much you know, right? So you have to be there for them. And so you have to, again, pattern creation, formalize processes where you're making sure that there's a mid-year calibration. You're making sure there's a performance planning meeting in the beginning with the employee that supports the strategic plan. You make sure it happens with a transparent system that's automated, that everyone's participating in, right? And so, and you also create performance plans that have a number of components that include accountabilities, measures, evaluation standards, certainly, competencies linked to merit dollars, certainly, because equally important to getting results is how you get there. But also, the third piece, very important, is an individual development plan, not equally weighted necessarily, but you're talking to the employee about their development. But as the employer, you're recognizing the need and you're building into the process something that addresses that employee's need that also helps the company.
Yeah.
Okay. but it has to be integrated into the process and it has to be executed flawlessly to make sure it's happening. And it's not happening across. Are they talking about individual development plans for people across America? Are they? No, 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 but wow, the impact it has on, wow, you care about me. Oh, you think this particular training class is good for me. Wow. You want to impact retention? Do that.
Yeah. Again, happy to hear you say that because that's actually a very common topic I have with my executive coaching clients. Is I have a lot of clients in the tech industry, and it's not just tech. It's across all kinds of it. But what I see is that they're especially technical experts, whether it's medical, legal, technology. So technical leaders that are in a people leadership role are still often very focused on the technical aspects, the job competency, but they're not meeting their team as humans. Like, what's your growth and development? What are your plans? They're not having those conversations on a regular basis. And it still shocks me how rarely that happens. Most of the almost quite a few of them are having one-on-one meetings with their team, but they're focused on putting out fires, talking about the technical aspects of the role, different projects, updates, and things like that, which are important to do, but not necessarily part of a one-on-one. And I've had people say, "Oh, I've reported to this manager for a year, and I've never had a development conversation with them." They get their year-end
Yeah.
review. They had their quarterly reviews and their biannual, semi-annual reviews, and then they get a ranking or rating, but they've never had this development conversation of, well, where do you want to go with your career? What is it that helps you thrive? And as you said,
Yeah.
just meeting them as
Yeah.
a person.
Yeah. There's a process that PepsiCo was, very good at. It was their development feedback process for employees. And it happened, twice a year. And, and it had a couple of interesting components, interesting principles it followed, right? And it was based off of an employee's performance plan. So every employee had a plan, right, that impacted the areas that I talked about earlier, including their development. All right. But when you met and you were getting feedback from your supervisor, there was a give and take. And the employee always went first. Okay. When they were talking about their strengths first, right? They would list out their go through their strengths. Well, I think I did this well, and I think I did this, and I've been successful this way, and I think that. The supervisor may be listening, and they may disagree with one, but when they respond, they don't address that yet. They wait until it's the opportunity areas, right? And they look for every opportunity to augment what the employee is saying. Like, I would agree with you, John, because when you did that, that really helped with this. You see, right? And then so the employee always goes first, followed by the supervisor, first on strengths, then on opportunity areas, right? And that give and take, it pulls them together and it just ignites the employees. It really drives engagement, especially when you're ending with, now let's talk about how we sharpen the saw here with some improved skills, and it may be a work along. I mean, it didn't necessarily have to cost money, right? There could be a big presentation that maybe everyone's going to go through in a couple of months that's really developed for everyone. And that's part of their plan, just to participate in that, right? And so there's a lot of ways, and there's a lot of online courses and creative things that you can do to develop people, right? And when you do that, people feel enriched and they feel yeah, more motivated to stay with an organization, I believe.
Absolutely. And that's, I love that you brought that up because it doesn't have to cost money at all. It's sometimes just giving someone an opportunity to learn a new aspect of their role within their role and get feedback in a different way so they can learn, grow, improve, develop in their existing competencies. It doesn't have to be, hey, we're going to fly you across the world to this conference or workshop or take this expensive course. Sometimes that's nice, but day to day on the job learning is massive. And I,
Sure.
yeah,
Could be a project role where they're the project leader and they're managing people in the project. Maybe they haven't managed people before and now they have an opportunity to do so,
yeah.
right? Great developmental assignment.
Now, and this sort of brings me to a different area I wanted to dive into, but there's obviously a lot of noise around AI right now. Uh, where are you seeing this technology that's genuinely helping retention, supporting employees, and where do you see the hype?
Hmm. Wow. Well, there are so many great tools, and I encourage everyone to leverage AI as fast as you can. I would get on the train as fast as you can because it's leaving. Okay. Uh, and so, the sad part is, and, sadly, you have to talk about this is, someone says, do you think it's going to eliminate jobs? And the answer is yes, sadly. Okay. But it's also going to really help people with their jobs. Some of the tools and the techniques coming out and the benefits from it. There's a plethora of opportunities to really leverage like chat GPT. It just goes on and on the list of opportunities uh, it make you look fantastic. I, you know, I, I had my assistant, put one of my communications into, chat. It came back. I'm like, wow. So, you should, I would encourage people to get on as fast as they can, leverage the techniques, but and I'll give you another just more powerful example about the benefits of AI. For example, we rolled out Paradox AI across 6 brands in 6 months within my last employer, and you know. It was a really interesting process because it looked at the non-essential activities, the repetitive tasks that were really weighing down the restaurant general managers, really, that weren't really adding any value to the business. And when we looked at him, it was like, well, candidate application screening, interview scheduling, and background checks, and also sourcing takes a lot of time, right? And they're not like staffing people necessarily, right? And they would schedule some people, not necessarily looking at everything they should have been looking at, and ultimately, like nobody shows up, right? So they gave up on the system. So we rolled out Paradox AI, automated all those tasks, lifted them up, saved the RGM's time. All of a sudden, they're hiring people in 8 days. Interview scheduling takes between 3 and 6 minutes. Just incredibly powerful. The restaurant general manager said, I said, look, you wanted help, we provided it. There it is across every restaurant. Boom. Right. And we've already changed out almost the entire workforce with better people given the sourcing. Right. And the system is automated and more scientific. And this group of people coming into the workforce now, right, they have higher expectations. They want it to be efficient. If they have to wait a week or 2 weeks, well, forget it. Right. So it has to be automated, transparent, efficient. And this Paradox AI product, I can tell you, has done that. It's been a really big hit and a real value add. And it's like a great example of leveraging AI.
Hmm. What were some of the learnings, important lessons you took out of that experience?
Well, it was a lot of work in 6 months for 6 brands, a lot of communication, a lot of training sessions, a lot of coordination, a lot of effort, a lot of work with IT, very essential. Couldn't have done it with IT and the integration of the systems. It was very challenging. It's an interdependent effort. Definitely teamwork makes the dream work. And we did it with Paradox AI. But we needed the vendor to do their part. IT needed to do my HR brand directors in the field needed to do their part, having to design, the questions for screening and all of the stuff they had to do, workbooks, extensive effort, a lot of coding, configuration, a lot of training, just a massive effort, but we pulled it off, and I'm not sure, who's done it faster, but, that's probably as fast as you can, 6 brands in 6 months. But yeah, it was hard work. It was the learning.
And what was the feedback you got from the people going through that process? The
Well,
scheduling, interviewing, things like that.
well, it's a great. Well, one of the behavioral shifts was because they gave up on the old system. Whereas now with the new system, they're just being. It's like here's the candidates to interview. Here they are. We're at 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like, oh, now I have to interview. That's right. Muscle builds your team. Take the opportunity. Here we go. Right. So they kind of relearn that interviewing skill. Right. But it's part of an automated process and therefore it's obligatory,
Yeah.
you see, and therefore they adapt. And in doing so, they benefit. It's like, wow, now I've got 5 options I didn't have before. And it really helps with the dynamic, right? And muscle building the unit, right? Because you're after that experience, you need the best team to do it.
Yeah. And getting the right people is critical. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time if you do it right.
If you do it right. There you go. If you do it right. Yeah.
Now you've worked across a lot of different brands and organizations. If we step back a bit to the bigger picture cultural aspect, so what cultural elements do you feel matter most if an organization wants to call it that health, stability, or long term performance in their people?
Well, you have to define what your core beliefs are as an organization, like really well. That you are a customer centric organization, that you're a people focused organization, that you are focused on the financial wellness of the organization. One of the things Pepsi did in the '80s was they took the traditional organizational pyramid and they flipped it upside down. With the customer at the top, right? And it was very powerful. And Tasty Restaurant Group did the same. You know, that sets the tone for the culture where the employees are like, that's right. I'm the most important. I'm here serving the customer, and I feel like you're coming to me, supporting me in that way. Wow. Okay, that's smart. Being a servant leader means applying the right coaching, facilitation, delegation, or even direction at the right time. All right. But ultimately, what you're after is the experience of the customer being fantastic, right? The return visit being a reality, the workflow being driven efficiently, the cost being managed effectively, and the profit coming in the door, right? And so you have to gauge, where do you spend your time? Where do you push? Where do you pull? Where do you encourage? Where do you direct? Right. And understanding individuals' motivations and skills to do the tasks associated with being effective is what leadership is.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's there's so much that is missed, I guess. So how do you turn that into practical day-to-day actions that most leaders could follow if we want to turn it into traction for people today?
Hmm. Wow. Huh. What part? What part do you want me to drill into? There's so many different pieces,
The areas you feel are most important.
Well, you need to be really passionate about a couple of things, and one is for an organization. Again, defining what the culture is in terms of the core beliefs and mission and all that. You have to do it, right? And caring has to be central to any service business. This element of caring, right? If you want people that generally feel. Uh, Good about serving others, right? I mean, you absolutely are after those types of people in a service business, that when they do it, that they feel good doing it, that they enjoy lighting up customers like a Christmas tree with joy,
Yeah.
right? I remember when I was working for AT&T as a young executive, I had to go through operator services training and learn how to be an operator, because I was managing long distance operators. I was 22 out of undergrad, right, working for AT&T in Manhattan. And, I was into it. I wanted to do a great job. I wanted to provide good service, and I was trying to get them excited, and they would, like, call the front desk and give commendations, and I had joy in saying things like "Gracias por llamar AT&T," and some of the other employees were like, "Okay, you're going to get paid. Lighten up," you know. But you have to generally enjoy serving others in a service business, I would say.
I
You
love
know,
that. Yeah, when I
you
was
know.
running and growing my fitness businesses, I found out early on. I started originally hiring, by education, and I hired a guy who was a PhD in exercise physiology, and I was like, oh, he was a great guy. One of the worst trainers I'd ever hired because he was just could not relate to people on an individual basis. And I had a good conversation with him. I'm like, dude, you need to be in the lab somewhere doing experiments on like frog tendons and things. And yeah, that's that's your ideal. And it was my hiring mistake
Right.
doing
Oh,
that.
yeah. We've all had one. Yeah.
Yeah, just one, just the only one. But I realized early on that I looked at, hey, the best people I'd hired, what do they have in common? And I realized for the industry I was hiring in, it was people that had taught summer camps to kids. And so I'm like, if you can thrive in a summer camp environment, teaching to all these kids, that energy and enthusiasm and that just desire and passion to serve people, it, for me, that was a turnkey thing. That was one of the first things I looked for. And it
Yeah.
served me so well throughout the entire time I
Yeah.
had the business.
Yeah. They also learn patience.
Yes. Yeah. It,
You have to be patient with
de-escalation
customers.
and the yeah, but that for
Yeah.
me, that was a big aha moment is,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
it I actually want? I can teach the
Mm,
physiology, the anatomy stuff, no
mm,
problem.
yeah. Yeah.
But it's yeah,
Who's coming in the door, right? Who you're hiring. Oh my gosh. I mean, you want to treat it as a family. You don't open your front door to anyone,
yeah,
right? You want to, right? Because you're concerned about the health and wellness of the family, right? You want to think about it that way. And you want to hire fantastic people. And the more fantastic the people are that you hire, the better you feel about serving them. Anyway, aside from that very important aspect, more macro level stuff, focusing, aligning the workforce, driving the culture, you have to have the linkage between the strategic plan and the individual efforts of the employees supporting it. Okay, we talked about performance planning earlier and the pieces of accountabilities, measures, evaluation standards, core competencies, and individual development plans. Okay. Beyond that, certainly there's, people forecasting. It would be an example. Also a mid-year calibration, also succession planning, very important. And certainly you've got to ask for feedback from the managers and all the employees. How are we doing? An organizational health assessment annually, every year, absolutely. And if you do it and you get the feedback, you better do something about it,
glad you said that. So
right? Right? And then you have to ensure that you give them an opportunity to provide their feedback about how they felt they did as part of an automated process. And I can tell you, Perform Yarn did that for us, the automated performance appraisal system. Fantastic. And people deserve a review. I mean, you work all year. I've worked all year and not gotten a review. I'm like, didn't get a review.
yeah,
You know, it's like you might have liked the review, the merit increase you got and the rating you got, but there was no review.
yeah.
And so you feel slighted in some way, I think. I don't know.
Well, and one thing too that I think often gets lost on leaders is that those reviews and the ratings should not be a surprise. If someone's getting blindsided by the review, that's a failure in leadership because that should have been in the moment coaching throughout the year and development opportunities and conversations that happened. And I see so many people I've talked to being like, that came out of nowhere. Like I didn't realize I wasn't doing things right.
Yeah, and you don't want that.
No.
Yeah. Well, the problem is, well, here's another point, right? So we talked more macro earlier about a developmental feedback process and the employee always going first, followed by the supervisor, right? First with strengths, then opportunity areas. So that's the process, right? But the principles that's being followed is you have to maintain or enhance self-esteem. Right. That has got to be a principle you're following. And it's a correct principle. It's like a lighthouse. We can't break it. We can only break ourselves against it. Right. It's always the correct thing to do to have people, the employees go first. Right. And it's always the correct thing to maintain their self-esteem or enhance it. Right. And a lot of these meetings, when you're bringing the supervisor in this process together, I mean, it's powerful. And the supervisors really like it. You know, they come back to me and they're like, "Yeah, I wasn't too sure, but that was fantastic. That was," it's like, great. I'm glad you like it. But anytime you're bringing people together, I think you're winning.
Most of the listeners on this podcast are people who are leaders, but particularly senior and executive leaders. If you had to sum up, wave this magic wand, sum up all your knowledge, and what are the key takeaways that you would leave people with today
About what?
about how to be a better leader, and particularly
Uh,
around the retention side that we talked about earlier?
well, you have to concern yourself with their current skill set and really understanding it. Okay. And in doing so, then understanding what opportunities exist to improve it and have discussions around that with people. When you do that, they're like, wow, this person's really taking an interest in me. So that's really fundamentally important for with any direct report relationship. Um, you want to try to do that. But, having a performance plan at the beginning of the year where you're setting the stage for the expectations, clear and concise expectations about what's needed to be achieved, and you lay it out, right? And you lay out the competencies and you lay out also a development plan for them. Maybe it's a class, a work along, whatever. And then you're having this alignment discussion at the beginning of the year, and they're like, okay, all right, all right, all right. People want to know where the bar is. People want to jump over the bar and be rewarded. No one wants to think they're jumping over the bar and then find out at the end of the year that they didn't jump over the bar. Okay. And that's why performance planning is so important, particularly as it relates to not just the accountability or the measure or KPI, but the evaluation standards for each that lay out what's outstanding, what's excellent, what's good, and what's unsatisfactory. And when you do it with that level of definition, it takes some time. But once it's integrated into an automated system, it's there the next year too. Okay, with some modification that may be needed. But people know where the bar is, right? And if you do it right, understanding the elasticity that exists there, right? Because if you make it too high, oh, I can't do it, right? And if it's too low, you're paying out when you shouldn't be paying out. So it's a science, so it has to be done correctly. But if you do it right and automate it, make it transparent, it's there for the long term. And it's the best way of focusing, aligning everyone's effort. It's like making sure you're squeezing every bit of effort out correctly, driving every level of efficiency and providing every level of clarity for the employee. A quick story. I remember I was in undergrad and I had a public speaking course, and the professor said, for my class, we're going to have a contract here. And here's the contract. If you get an average of this grade, you can go this. If you do this, if you do 100-page paper, you can get an A. If you don't, you can only get, a B or something, right? And he laid it out. And most of the students looked at the 100-page paper and they said, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Yeah, I'm not. So I'm like, let me go talk to this guy. So I walk, I go, so tell me about this 100-page paper. He goes, oh, well, Mike, I just want some volume to it. It doesn't have to be 100 pages, but it's got to have some weight to it. It's got to have some meat to it. It's got to be a substantive document. You understand? I'm like, yeah, okay. I go, I'm going to do it. And so I did. And I thought I was, going to get an A, but just to be sure, I took his contract with me and I put it inside the jacket that I'm wearing, just like the one you have on. And I walked up to his office and said, hey, I'm just going home on break. And I just want to let you know I'm expecting an A. And he says, well, I was thinking A minus. And so I reach into my jacket and I pull out the contract and I snap it with my fingers. And I said, well, I was thinking A. He goes, okay, Mike, have a good break. Enjoyed having you in the class. I go, see you later. So these become, Tim, contracts in a sense, right? This is what the expectation is. And if you do this, you can be guaranteed this type of rating.
Yeah.
Which equals merit dollars, a percent increase, right, et cetera. And also impacts bonus money, right?
Yeah. And if
So,
it's set up well,
yeah.
you want
Yeah.
people, if it's benefiting the business and it's benefiting them, you want people to reach that level.
Oh, absolutely. And it pays for itself. And everyone wins when you do it that way. The organization wins. And then it grows and the infrastructure expands and you can promote people. Isn't that nice as opposed to a retracting structure, right? When it's expanding, that's when the people are feeling fantastic and most secure, right? It's with growth. All right, so everybody should be lining up to make sure the organization is successful so it can continue supporting you and your family. Right. So anyway, so that's a big piece. The development feedback piece is huge. You have to ask for feedback. You have to do something about it. You have to review people appropriately. Um, these are the fundamentals of making sure you're managing an organization appropriately. If you're not doing these things, something's wrong. Okay. These are multiplying things. All right. 2 times 2 times 0 equals 0. We don't want any zeros, right? You have to do performance planning. And these are interdependent processes, right? When you're doing developmental feedback, well, you're doing it based on what? The performance plan at the beginning of the year, right? When you're assessing someone's performance, then you're talking about that in succession planning, right? And you're talking about it again in the performance review. So you can't, it's an obligatory process, one that it's a pattern creation, it's a cultural formation of things that people can expect, and it should be broadly articulated to the organization. So they're like, oh, this is what I can expect. It makes me feel stable, right? And anyway, so that's all part of it. I could go on.
Amazing. Well, this has been awesome. And there's so much more we could talk about, but for the sake of time, we want to keep it in a bit of a certain window. So I really genuinely appreciate you sharing your wisdom and experience and insights. Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Well, Mike at mgidelivers.com is my email.
Okay.
And that's a good way of connecting with me. Also on LinkedIn. I think I provided you a link. I'm on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. You can connect with me on there.
I'll make sure that
And I'm
goes in
happy
the
to
show
answer.
notes.
And I'm happy to answer questions for people about any of the things I talked about. Okay, so you want to shoot me an email? Feel free. I will respond. Okay, I'll try to do that as timely as I can. But to you, Tim, thanks for having me. It's been a delight. You're a pro. I really appreciate you giving me an opportunity to share some things with your folks today.
My pleasure. It's been an honor. And like I said, I'll make sure those go in the show notes. And yeah, looking forward to reconnecting again soon.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
That wraps up another episode of the Working Well podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Now, which guests or topics would you like to see featured on the show? Message me through LinkedIn or on the contact page of timborys.com with your ideas. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tim Borys with Fresh Wellness Group, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.